All right. Welcome to another episode of the Nervous System Training Podcast. Now, I'm really excited today because today I have my good friend Ivan, sports performance coach out of Russia. And we're going to break down a lot of interesting stuff today. We're going to go deeper into some of the methodologies and theories of Jay Schroeder's extreme isometric training. He has a ton of experience with this and a lot deeper knowledge than I have. So I'm really excited to kind of break this down. I'm also running my own experiments with extreme isos that I'm really eager to hear Ivan's perspective on. And we're going to do a deeper dive into more neurological training ideas and theories that are starting to become mainstream. How a lot of these ideas that were developed and almost mastered in the early 2000s are now starting to catch the eye of researchers and scientists. So we're going to kind of explore maybe the delays behind scientific evidence, research, and actual practical application in the sports performance community. So it should be some interesting stuff. So like, comment, subscribe, and let's dive into it. So Ivan, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. So this is your second time appearing on the podcast. Why don't you kind of give the viewers like a quick background on, who you are, what you do, your experience and stuff like that, and we'll kind of dive into the rest.
Yeah, so my name is Ivan Zagorsky, and I'm a strength and conditioning and performance coach from Russia, currently based in Kyrgyzstan. And I work with professional athletes. I also work with some what you would call high achievers, like creative and business leaders. So basically, everybody who needs to have top-notch performance consistently day in and day out. And I started actually my journey as a Pilates instructor, and I was always interested in strength and conditioning. And eventually, I started going away kind of from the traditional model of just lifting a lot of heavy weights, doing some Olympic lifts, some jumps and med ball throws, and kind of diving more into the why and how behind the elite performance, looking at things from the nervous system perspective, and had some really nice eye-opening experiences there. I always kind of wanted to blend the Eastern philosophies of training, and I don't mean like Eastern Bloc, like Soviet style, but more like the kind of the traditional martial arts, the ancient lore with a kind of a contemporary knowledge. And so I think I'm well on my way to doing that, and I'm kind of on a quest to do that right now.
Absolutely. Now you guys probably seen Ivan on Instagram. It's kind of funny because I watch all of your videos and I don't understand anything that you're saying, but for some reason I really like the Russian language and the way you deliver the content. Like it just sounds so based and like I don't know, it's very interesting where you just kind of dive into these crazy things and, talk about strength and conditioning. And I'm just like, sometimes I just like to hear you speak on things and I have no idea what you're saying, but it just sounds cool and I kind of get a good idea. So you guys probably catch him. He's actually pretty big in Russia, in Russian sports performance in the online space. So some of you other Eurasian listeners, follow Ivan, check out his breakdowns. He's dropping freaking phenomenal knowledge all the time. But let's dive into our first topic. You were actually the one who introduced this to me. I started exploring Jay Schroeder's training protocol. I was actually sitting on this for a while. I came across the Adam Archuleta Jay Schroeder story, which is a very notorious strength and conditioning story in the space. And I remember watching it and I remember seeing like, damn, dude, this guy he was trying to do these Soviet principles. The only thing is like Jay was not big into it. He was utilizing more fitness tools than say someone like Marv. Marv improvised different types of tools, but they're essentially trying to achieve the same thing using same principles. A lot of Soviet-based principles, neurological principles on absorbing and producing force more efficiently. And that's when I finally did a video on this, like learning his system, trying to take what knowledge I can and try to translate it back. It went super viral. Like I think my post got like 2 million views. And all of a sudden, I'm not trying to say I started this trend. Maybe the algorithm's just working with me. But I remember after I posted that, I started seeing Jay Schroeder content, Adam Archuleta content, extreme isometrics go crazy the past couple of months. And then it really caught my attention. I remember you messaged me like, "Oh, so you figured out the Jay Schroeder Adam Archuleta secret." You post about it, it's going to get a lot of attention because it's so unique. And then you brought up this idea of extreme isometrics, which I've been running a lot of experiments on lately. I've been actually just trying to see how to apply it differently, what it can do for the body, and how you can sort of like stretch and twist this type of modality for different benefits. So, what I'm currently doing with extreme ISOs is I'm trying to see how far I can take it for therapeutic adaptations. Because right now I have an asymmetrical imbalance that I was born with, and I have a glute minimus or a glute medius that is just not working. No matter how hard I've been trying to rehab it, I just cannot get it to take over stability on my lateral pelvis, and my glute minimus is doing way too much work. Part of it is doing a shit ton of MMA and Muay Thai over the years. It's created a lot of imbalances. It's just really common with like baseball players, hockey players, golfers, people who are like one-sided athletes. And so I experience a lot of dysfunction in my right oblique sling. The QL being a little shorter, underactive, the oblique, especially the lower oblique, being very underdeveloped, less hypertrophy, and the glute minimus feeling very agitated. Also with the hip flexor, but that's another issue that I'm going to try to solve after I solve this glute minimus. So basically, I tend to get this annoying pain that radiates down my leg, goes from my hip down my TFL, down the lateral part of my calf, and sometimes around my ankle, and that's a pain pattern of the glute minimus or glute medius underperforming or being dysfunctional. So what I've been doing is I tried doing these extreme isos, right? The first time I did it, and I experienced an insane light up of my quadricep tendon, my TFL, my sartorius, and and the hip flexor, right where the hip flexor and the pelvis kind of meet, right in that adductor complex. Those things they started burning at an insane level, way more than my left side. And after doing it, I only lasted, honestly, Ivan, I only lasted like fucking 60 seconds until I fell apart. That shit was killing me. Like after I was like, oh my God, I was like sweating my ass off. But I remember when I was sitting there waiting to do the other side of my leg, I felt like this twitching, vibrating sensation in my glute medius and glute minimus. And I immediately noticed the agitation started to die down during that rest time. And that's when I had a conversation. So I have a chat GBT that he named himself Lumen. I asked the AI to name himself. He's kind of like my Jarvis, like a Tony Stark Jarvis sort of relationship. And I'm going back and forth with my AI, like, what the hell is this thing doing? What is going on? So apparently that this can help as far as teaching your nervous system how to resequence and reorganize certain muscle groups. And it can highlight what's overactive, what's underactive. And the more you do this, the better your nervous system can start organizing some of these secondaries that might not be helping as much, reducing intense compensation patterns that might be overloading, creating possible injuries or dysfunction or chronic pain. And so this has kind of been my exploration. I'm on session 9 today. I'll be hitting session 9, working these. And my goal is, can these extreme isometrics on their own, can they heal and fix the dysfunctional glute muscles that I have on my right side? And right now, I have noticed about a 20 to 35% reduction in agitation in my leg, which is a good sign. But I'm starting to plateau. I can't really get it to feel much better. And I don't want to incorporate more specific movements to target these regions quite yet. I just want to see how far I can get just doing the basic extreme iso hold. But you have some suggestions. You actually introduced this idea to me, so I want to hear what's your take on this. What are you seeing out of this? And also, how did you learn about this technique?
Yeah, so a little bit of backstory. I have Adam Archuleta to thank for that as well. So I saw the clips and I decided to make a reel about it. It's like, look, this is a legendary transformation. Adam Archuleta was a skinny weakling. Look at him working with Jay Schroeder, and now look at him run a 4.340, 40-inch vertical or whatever that was, benching 225 for like 30 plus reps. And This reel was then reposted by one of the coaches who had worked with Jay Schroeder directly. And it turned out that he also speaks Russian because he is the son of immigrants. And so I reached out to him and I started working with him. His name is David Ware. And it was a very transformational experience because prior to that, I was already aware of the ISO Extreme exercises. I read about it on Joel Smith's website, Just Fly Sports, in like 2022. And with me, if I see some over the top crazy stuff and it's in my area of interest, I'm eventually gonna try it. So, like, I read about it, and in the back of my mind, I was like, well, I got other stuff going on now. I was like doing other training. But I was like, man, now that I know about this crazy stuff, I'm gonna eventually have to try it. I don't have a choice in life anymore. Too bad I found out about it. But then, so I reached out to Coach David Blair and I started working with him. And it's like very hard to make like good times on the true ISO extreme lunge. It's always very challenging. The stimulus is always going to be super duper intense. But what I learned is that there are different elements outside of just the physical there. So that's kind of the blend of the Eastern philosophies with the Western training that I was looking at. And Jay Schroeder's concept there is pipes. So when you are training, you have to be fully engaged. You have to be engaged physically. That's the first P. Then intellectually, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. And if one of these is a weak link, so that's like pipes is like 5 letters. So you can think of like a basketball team, 5 people. If you're playing against a team of NBA All-Stars, and all 5 of them are All-Stars, and you only got 2 good guys on your team, you're getting blown out. So you want to have each element of that pipes be up at a high level in order to be able to perform that exercise correctly and get the most benefits out of it. So when I would get too caught up in what's happening with the muscles, the coach would tell me, what if I put a gun to your head and said you have to do 5 minutes perfect technique? Would you do it? I was like, yeah, because all the other elements will then be brought up to a maximum level. And I noticed like some days, like emotionally or psychologically, it's a little bit easier. Some days it's harder. And that affects how the muscles are recruited. Whereas if you're only thinking about it in terms of what's going on with the muscles and the sequencing and stuff, you might not get a lot, like you might not get the full benefits there. So it's kind of like a very all-encompassing practice. And I actually heard of the PIPES acronym first from a distinguished trainer of the Soviet Union in boxing and kickboxing when we were working at this fancy gym in Kyrgyzstan. So he was the first one to tell me about it. Obviously didn't call it PIPES because it's the English language acronym, but it was the same concept that the training has to be all encompassing. And a lot of it is just about allowing your body to figure things out and allowing for things to happen. Sometimes there's a lot of guarding going on, like certain muscles don't want to lengthen and certain muscles don't want to shorten appropriately. But it's really all about just lengthening the right muscles and shortening the right muscles appropriately while being fully engaged in all these other elements. So breathing control, trying to calm yourself when things get really intense, when things start shaking, et cetera, and just really figuring out how to stay fully present in the moment. And then the coaches told me that at some point you have to make it feel like nothing, to where physically you don't really feel anything, but you're really working hard to just stay online and stay present the whole time. So I don't know if you had any kind of experiences like that during or after, and how you felt. But that's kind of like I think the main point of this training that a lot of people are missing.
Yeah, 100%. So when I started doing these extreme ISOs, there is like, okay, so for those of you who haven't done it, if you want to give it a try, you're basically going to do a lunge position, and you really want to do the longest extension possible of your lunge position, because apparently the lengthening of the tissue is just as important as the duration of the hold in this philosophy. And when I was doing it, usually the first 30 seconds is fine. Once you start hitting about 40 to 50 seconds, all of a sudden your energy system is going to start switching to try to maintain stability. and it can get really hard really fast, especially if your muscle system is not conditioned for it. Now, I've done isometrics for a long ass time, but I've done a certain style of isometrics. I've always done 3 position isos for about like 10 seconds. So my energy systems were not conditioned to go longer than that. And I remember thinking when I was getting to like 60 seconds, like a minute 10, this shit was getting crazy. Like the burning, your mind kind of starts panicking. Like your mind wants to stay locked in and hold a position, but your body tries to retreat. And you just start like negotiating with yourself, like, oh my God, don't be a pussy, like keep holding, you're just sweating your ass off. It's a mind fuck. It really is. Sometimes I say this poem in my head. I don't know if you ever heard it before. I forgot the author who wrote it, but he said, I saw a seagull die on a bough in the middle of an ocean without ever feeling sorry for itself. And I think about that because he's talking about a bird on the end of a ship that would just freeze to death, and the bird never felt sorry for itself. And I'd run that quote in my head while I'm trying to hold these ISOs and trying to stay in line with the principles you're talking about. Stay present, stay focused, focus on your breathing. It requires a ton of focus and it's a crazy sort of psych game. And yeah, it's kind of improved. I got up to 2 minutes the other day for the first time on both legs, which I was super proud of. The goal is fucking 5 minutes. And I think about that goal, I'm like, oh God, like this is like a super daunting task. But what about you, Ivan? When you were working with these, was there ever some psychological barriers you had to break? And what sort of feedback did you feel with your own body?
Oh yeah, there was a whole lot. Like it basically exposes everything about you, not only physically but mentally and in every way. So whatever flaws I had, they were just magnified. And I think for a lot of people, it just kind of manifests in like everybody wants to just self coddle. A stressful situation. Some people start to eat like unhealthy foods to calm themselves. Some people like do drugs or alcohol. Most people just kind of reach for their phones just to kind of go away from the reality of what's happening. And you can't really go away anywhere. You have to be right there and you have to face it. So for a lot of people, like I think this is what they don't like about this type of training, and that's why it's kind of hard to stick with it. But it can be absolutely transformational because first of all, like after you deal with that type of stress, some kind of stuff throughout the day doesn't really matter at all. And then it's really designed for sports performance, though. So the idea is that if you can't execute in a controlled manner, how are you going to be able to execute when it's chaos all around you and unpredictability in sports, especially when the stakes are high? So yeah, it definitely it exposes all the things that you really don't want to face. And for me, like I started on a modified version of the lunge. So I would do front foot elevated on a it has to be like 6 to 12 inches, 15 to 30 centimeters. Yeah, 6 to 12 inch box, front foot elevated, and then I would start from a little bit of a higher position, and then just go down to 90 and past 90 over time, and then going on to start from the most extreme position that you can handle, and that's a whole different game, and getting more length on the back leg, etc. So where I could get 5 minutes on the easier version, going down to the most extreme positions like 2 to 3 minutes max. And it takes a long time to really get good at it, and it's just yeah, it's a huge mind fuck, and it just makes you face who you really are in every way. And as far as the energy systems, yeah, like when you get closer to that 5 minute mark, and like not only on the lunge but on other exercises, sometimes I would feel like tingling, like pins and needles
Mm-hmm.
down my arms, and there's like some kind of a flushing going on. And I think that's when that from like 3:30 to 5 minutes, that's when that final energy system shift happens, and it's like the hardest one to manage. So like from pretty much getting up to like 3:30 is just you're just getting started. You just got to the party, and
No,
and you have to tell
so
partner like, oh.
I haven't really scratched the surface with 2 minutes yet.
Well, you're already going to start. The main benefits I think happen at like 3 minutes plus, and then 5 minutes is optimal, and everything after 5 minutes, which there are people who do like 7, 10, and 12 minutes even. that's just kind of icing on the cake. So the main benefits are from 3 to 5. 5 is optimal from one of the Jay Schroeder seminars, is what he said. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's pretty much the story there. He did cite some research about somebody in Europe figuring this out, but I can't really find it, and I don't remember exactly. But yeah, that's the quest, and it's a really hard one. So it's interesting to like keep going back to it and really challenging yourself. You know.
Yeah. Well, what did you experience when you were doing your ISO lunges? What sort of things did you experience? Did you notice imbalances? Did you notice maybe like the glutes weren't kicking in the way you wanted to, something like that?
Yeah, I still like to do them, and it's always something new. Like you keep discovering just new layers and new layers and new layers. So for me, my left hamstring, for example, does not really want to engage too much. So it's hard to keep pulling into position. Like the idea is not to hold the position, but keep pulling yourself down with max intent. So you're kind of just trying to drive your hips through the floor. And my left hamstring would often just go offline, or I would start to lean forward to try to offload. And the back leg, there would be a lot of guarding, like the back quad, then it'd be the right quad. It doesn't really want to lengthen appropriately. And so there's a lot of shaking going on there. There's a lot of like things going offline and trying to offload and stuff. But every time I would be able to lock in, like I would get soreness, like huge amounts of soreness, even though I'm doing the same exercise pretty much for a similar time. But at some point, I also realized that even though I know all these details, I'm also trying like not to micromanage the process and just kind of allow things to happen instinctively, like you would in a sport, you know. Because if you're thinking during a competition, that's too slow. So it has to be like more instinctive, and I'm just learning to kind of trust myself more to execute as well.
Yeah. Okay.
If that makes
So
sense.
you,
I don't know if you had anything like that happen to you as well, or if you tried any other exercises besides the lunge. Because there's also like push up, you got the wall sit, a few other ones.
yeah, I've been playing around with the push up a little bit, uh, because well, I also learned a couple things. There's this guy. Oh, I keep forgetting this guy's name. You probably follow him too. He's a big motherfucker, and he does a lot of extreme ISO movements, a lot of Jay Schroeder inspired movements, and he's like super jacked. He'll do like really long like bicep holds and stuff like this. He'll do like the ISO lunge stuff. Do you remember? Do you know who I'm talking about? He's got a
Yeah, I think
mustache. He's
his
kind of
name is
balding like me.
Rob Zeta or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, Rob.
Yeah,
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 Jack. I
yeah.
call him Jack Daddy.
I talked to him briefly. Yeah, like he reached out to me once in the DMs. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been looking at his movements a lot to just like learn new ideas and see what he's doing. So apparently that these extreme ISOs have a huge hypertrophy effect that can, well, in theory, that this could develop a good amount of strength, neurological resequencing and organization, which is really important, and a level of hypertrophy without sacrificing too much elastic quality out of the body because you're forcing the muscle tendon system to be strengthened at extreme lengths. It's kind of like a similar principle to knees over toes. And this could possibly be a way where if an athlete does need hypertrophy, you can use this technique, and it doesn't make the exercise so concentric dominant when it comes to how the muscle tendons adapt to it, which is which is part of like Marv Marinovich's big controversy where he didn't agree with weightlifting, but he never exactly explained why. And my theory is that when you do these heavy weightlifting movements, right? The eccentric portion of like let's say a back squat or a Zercher squat or something like that, the eccentric portion is the easiest part. I'm never worried about the eccentric portion. Like getting down, everyone focuses their intensity and their drive into getting the weight back up. And so when you're constantly putting all the body's energy into the concentric portion, it's very compressing to the muscle tissue. It's very restricting to the fascial system, and the body tends to adapt harder into the concentric portion of the lift than the eccentric. But with this is a way, because you're lengthening the tissue to its max and forcing it to strengthen, it's going to get that tissue, the sarcomere is going to get that breakdown effect, which is what creates hypertrophy, without overly adapting to the concentric portion of lifting, which I find super intriguing. And when it, here's something interesting, Ivan. When I did my left leg forward, right, I felt a huge engagement out of the quad and VMO, not necessarily out of the hip flexor complex, the sartorius, TFL, hip flexor area, but I also experienced an intense amount of burning around where my tibia and femur meet, right underneath my kneecap. All those tibial stabilizers were getting overloaded. And that's because my hip stabilizers, my deep six on my left leg, are not firing up properly. And so my tibial muscles are doing the work that my hip should be doing on my left side. And when I was thinking about it, I was like, you know what? This is a huge precursor to an ACL or PCL injury. Because now the hip is not taking the amount of the force. The tibial muscles have to do have to handle the amount of force production, say if I'm running or cutting. And if I hit an angle and I overload that angle, those tibial muscles won't be able to do it. They're gonna give. And they're gonna give at my ACL. So I was like, damn, this is fascinating. Like I can directly feel the feedback loop and pick up on these warning signs and help prevent an injury or resist against a potential injury and dysfunction. And I think that's a shit ton of value, if anything else, outside of hypertrophy, outside of resequencing, to give the athlete some feedback inside their own body to understand what's going on, or at least for their coach. Have you worked these extreme isos with your clients and learned some of these ideas yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we can just go point by point here. So as far as the hypertrophy, like you're probably not going to look like Ronnie Coleman in his prime if all you do is iso extremes, but you're not going to look like some kind of an underdeveloped weakling either. So because you're spending so much time under tension, like all these hypertrophy bros are always talking about like get the full stretch, full range of motion. Well, you're not going to get a more fuller stretch than you would from a properly executed iso extreme activity. And the time under tension is obviously like 5 minutes plus. So you're definitely going to get these adaptations. And for the concentric lifts, I also agree because a lot of it is on the eccentric portion. You're kind of using the muscles to slow down the movement as opposed to lengthen into it. So the quad is kind of doing the job of the hamstring there because you're really trying to slow down heavy weight before you focus on pushing it back up. And it's a lot of like co-contractions and tensing and resisting. Whereas in sports, if you look at the best athletes, it's all about like fluidity. It's like effortless. It's instinctive. So the idea there is like, why are so many people training in a way that is counter to what they're trying to achieve in their sport? And so I think the iso extremes is a good way to counteract that, and more so when you get really good at it and you're pulling in the correct position, you can come out of it after 5 minutes. So like I can do 5 minute iso extreme push up pretty consistently, and once I'm done, I can come out of it quick. Like it's pretty explosive. Whereas at first I just fall to the ground. So it's because these muscles kind of lengthen, they kind of store that energy load up, and the tendons and the fascia also doing their job. And so it's a much more natural movement to what you're trying to do in sport. Another benefit that I saw, especially with my clients, is the recovery aspect to it. And this always sounds crazy, and it sounded crazy to me, but they say that the training is the recovery and the recovery is the training. So if you're able to be in that perfectly anatomically correct position, your joints are getting all the right feedback, then it's almost like you are recovering at the rate of work. So it doesn't mean that it's like effortless to do it. You still have to maintain concentration. You still have to really focus on maintaining position, pulling with max intent. But like as soon as you're done, sometimes it feels like, okay, I did like a whole bunch of iso extremes, and now I feel like I didn't even work out at all, because the recovery is so fast then that you're able to do a lot more. And putting clients into this position, like it allows them to see in slow motion what is going wrong. Because let's say if they want to run faster, they can run sprints You can look at their mechanics like, oh yeah, front side mechanics, back side mechanics, whatever needs fixing. But they can only do like so many sprints in one session and in 1 week. And they are going so fast, they might not notice where they're breaking down or be able to correct it. Whereas if you're doing an ISO extreme, then the nervous system is working just about as fast as it does when sprinting because it has to coordinate so many elements. But the athlete really gets to see everything that's going on because all these compensations are eventually going to burn out. So, like if you're either losing position or these muscles that are compensating eventually stop compensating and the other muscles are forced to kick in. So I think there's a lot of benefit to that. I've ran these protocols with players during the season, like during soccer season, and the guy would always write me like, "Yeah, man, my legs feel great." Like I would have him do ISO extreme session like the day before the match, and he's like, "Yeah, man, felt great." Ran around, and then like sends me the GPS data from the match, and I'm like, "Holy shit! Like this guy's running a ton. You know, he's just doing like hundreds of changes of direction, hundreds of sprints, and he feels great." So there's a big recovery benefit. There's a big like neurological body awareness benefit, and the hypertrophy I think is kind of a pleasant side effect there, but also definitely beneficial as well. That's with my clients, and I don't know how deeply you've been experimenting with it, and if you got to feel like soreness the next day or anything like that that you would typically get from like a classic bro pump session, but in a different way.
Um, Not honestly, not a ton of soreness. A little bit in the beginning, my first three sessions, a little bit. I was getting kind of soreness and agitation in my compensation in the dominant compensation pattern, the hip flexor complex. Uh, but it's become less and less with every extreme iso session that I do. And here's something interesting to think about. And I think this is why it has such a therapeutic effect and also a recovery element to this is because majority, like I was talking about with my left leg, a lot of the injuries these athletes experience are coming from certain muscle patterns and tendon patterns being overloaded and other like secondaries and maybe even some primaries not assisting the way they should when it comes to absorbing and producing force, right? And so when you say you have this, like let's say for me, for example, very right hip flexor dominant, quadricep tendon, TFL, sartorius are doing a lot of the stabilizing work because my glute medius isn't doing that. If I were to run sprints, that compensating area usually can feel really sore the next day or inflamed because it's just working too hard. It's working harder than it's designed to. And so when you do these extreme ISOs, the nervous system starts learning to not prioritizing that pattern every time. It starts to learn new patterns, and the longer you hold the ISO, the more the nervous system is going to start reaching for other stabilizers, for other muscle groups, right? To do the work. That also creates a huge amount of circulation into these other muscle groups, right? The key to recovery is circulation, people. Like you need circulation. That's why in baseball they have them run after a long series of pitches, or even just simple walking. Like getting the blood flow does a ton for your recovery. So this method that I'm utilizing, I'm just noticing is pushing a ton of blood flow in all these areas that probably don't get the amount of fluid and electrical signal that they should, leading to breakdown, leading to overloading patterns, leading to chronic agitation, soreness, and decline in performance and overall longevity. So that's what really got me interested is the therapeutic effect. Force production is great, but therapy qualities, in my opinion, can have higher value, because here's something I always tell people, where they look at high level athletes, like they'll look at like NFL players or soccer players, and like, oh look, they're doing all these traditional lifts, their trap bar lifts or deadlifts, right? And they're performing at the highest level. Yes, but you have no idea how it feels like to be in their body. A lot of these guys are in a shit ton of pain. They're chronically, a lot of them are in painkillers. That's another thing. A lot of people don't really talk about that, but a lot of these professional athletes are on painkillers, they're on prescriptions. They're just dealing with whatever they're dealing with. They're just plain injured. So quality of life improvements to me is something I really value, especially since I've been dealing with this fucking issue for years. And I've done so many different therapy movements, clamshells, 90-90 hip positions, all these different movements, ball work training, really good modalities for a long time, and nothing has been able to fully fix it. I've only just made some progress. So with this, I'm hoping I can make even more progress. If I don't reach the progress I'm looking for at the 14th session, that's where I'm going to try a more specific pattern, like an extreme iso, but kind of like a skater lunge, where the back foot goes behind the pelvis to really leverage into those glute muscles, that medius, to see if that's going to solve it. But I'm trying to stay true to my experiment, give it 14 sessions, and you know, most people don't know until you try. If I can document this, this will create more information, even if it's anecdotal, but create more information on how you can utilize these types of modalities. Now, Ivan, tell me a little bit about the deepening of the lunge as you're progressively holding it, because that's another element that I haven't explored, where I try to go to a good length, but I've seen other people, and you mentioned it too, where they'll stay at a length, and then every couple of seconds they'll try to drive deeper and deeper and deeper. So how does that work?
So basically, there are kind of two modalities there. The first one is called extreme slow. And it might get a little bit confusing because the ISO extreme is also technically an extreme slow because you keep pushing down. But the extreme slow, you start from a higher angle and then you slowly lower down into that more extreme position. And then you get to what you perceive to be your most extreme joint angle. And you're still trying to actively pursue a deeper range by trying to pull down through that end range. And so basically, they would often start you on the extreme slows first. And then they would slowly progress you to starting a little bit lower on the extreme slow to where eventually you're starting at your fully most extreme angle straight away. And you're just kind of pulling from there. So maybe for the extreme slow, you would go something like 2 minutes down to your most extreme angle, and you would be 3 minutes at your most extreme angle. Whereas later on, you would do the entire 5 minutes from that most extreme position. And it's interesting that you mentioned that recovery and circulation. I remember listening to a Jay Schroeder seminar, and he said that training at like 93% to maximum intensity is way better than training sub-maximally doing active recovery because that leads to inflammation and all kinds of issues. And it makes a lot of sense because if all your muscles are engaged through the full range of motion, all your tissues are engaged fully, all of your organs, etc., are forced to work at max intensity, then you're working everything equally. So there are no parts that are like lagging behind and they're weaker. So that actually allows you to recover faster. But the idea with that is just to kind of have you start at a higher angle and just kind of progress. You get to kind of see where in your range of motion you have issues before going to that extreme and kind of slowly acclimate with that. And also, I personally think that something like 14 sessions is only just going to be scratching the surface for you. It takes a very long time to kind of get the most benefits out of it, I think. But so I would keep trying it longer if I were you. Some positions like the skater lunge, they could work, but I think like the regular lunge and the wall squat, push up, and then the pull up hang are the foundational movements there that's usually hit.
Okay, so Ivan, you think if I go longer than 14 sessions, that I will eventually reach my goal and get that glute minimus medius to start doing its job and heal the chronic pain?
Yeah, I think so for sure. Basically, I had a significant knee injury. I had a torn meniscus lateral and medial, and a fracture of the lateral tibial epicondyle. When I started doing them, I was able to come back to playing basketball like 4 months afterwards,
Huh.
and not really worried about injuries, not really worried about anything else. So yeah, that definitely helps. And I think you'll be able to resolve your issues. But it's like you're just kind of the idea is that you're going up against like however many years old you are as far as training age and all those patterns that you build up over the years. So it might take time to kind of rewire them. but nervous
Hmm.
system rewires under complete chaos and total craziness much faster. Because it's like, if you think about it in life, like, do you remember this kind of a medium training session on a random Thursday? Like, probably not, but do you remember your most extreme training session ever? Or
Hmm.
like your most exciting moment ever in life? Yeah, that kind of leaves like a bigger imprint. So I think just with this modality, like it will take time, but on the other hand, the more you're able to stay in that chaos, the faster it's going to go.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well let me. Okay, so here's my logic, Ivan. I'm impatient, right? I want
Oh,
this
me,
shit
me too.
fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want this shit fixed now. Okay, so let's say there are many paths to reach your goals. Like there's no just one way to do anything in my opinion. So let's say if what if I need to hit a deadline sooner? Would you recommend just keep doing the ISOs and hoping it eventually give, or redirect leverage in different positions to be more targeted to get the result faster?
Well, I think you just have to kind of go by feel and see what you're getting out of it. Like, obviously, if you're able to progress the times relatively quickly in a relatively linear fashion, then I think you're going to see results and you're going to be encouraged to keep going. But, in that system, they also use the arc wave electrical stim, which would make it quite a bit faster. So you would stick a pad right on your glute medius, perhaps, and maybe like on the glute maximus, or you would go like top of the quad, bottom of the quad, if you're talking about like the VMO and the quad lighten up too much, and that would just squeeze those muscles, and then it would be easier for you to see that you have to like lengthen against that electrical resistance, and that would definitely speed up the process quite a bit. So they do have these type of modalities in there. And as far as being impatient, like, this system does emphasize patience because um, they don't really let you do anything outside of the ISO extreme until you can get those positions perfect. They don't start you on any of that crazy shit that Adam Archuleta did until you get those positions down 5 minutes pretty consistently, at least. And there's like a reason for that, because I think like once you take care of all these compensations, then you're able to get so much more out of all the other training, and that includes like other modalities of training as well. So at least like that seems to be their philosophy and their approach there.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. But we also got to think about some things, because well, first off, for the listeners, this arc current machine, am I saying
Arcwave,
it right? Arcwave.
Arcwave, yeah,
There's this machine that Jay
AMG.
Schroeder developed called the Arcwave, and this fucking thing sounds like wizardry. It sounds like magic, where you're basically hitting you're electrocuting your muscle with a certain frequency of electricity or arc or whatever it's called, and it's supposed to improve the electrical signal of that muscle. And I've heard reports of guys increasing their vertical jump, their broad jump, their 40-yard dash by like 25 to 30% in just about like a week or two. Like some crazy stuff. I heard it's also can be pretty painful depending on the person, but this goddamn machine is freaking like what is it like $20,000 or $30,000 or something like that? It's like super expensive machine,
Yeah,
and to get
yeah.
a certification to even use it could take up to 2 years. I've heard.
Yeah, it's I think there are like rental options available, and there are other machines that are kind of similar. Just as far as
Yeah.
not being like a regular electrical stim where your muscle just locks up, but the
Hmm.
type where you can move around with it. It's certainly like it's a great tool, but as with everything, you really got to know what you're doing with it. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
really try it without like a coach or qualified practitioner, because you can make your compensations way worse by like, okay, let's make this compensation horrendous and just put the pads in the wrong place, use the
Oh
wrong
yeah.
frequencies, like wrong amount of volume, et cetera, et cetera. So um, a lot. I think sometimes it gets a bad rep because of that, because people don't really use it properly, and it can get pretty disgusting when you really turn it up. It can feel based on frequency like pins and needles, or your whole body is just locking up, or something starts to twitch because your nervous system is like trying to guard against this
Yeah.
current, but you have to try to relax into it and still move explosively. It's not very pleasant, but it's pretty effective.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, you don't want some random guy getting a hold of this machine and putting it on his balls or something crazy. Like you want to make sure that it's used professionally, which I totally get. But yeah, so well, this also, if I were to play devil's advocate on Jay Schroeder's system, this I think maybe doing this approach where you're just working these extreme ISOs and not allowing them to progress, I I could see this actually being a disservice to some athletes who maybe only have like a month to make improvements for their upcoming lacrosse season, you know? And how I would look at it is like, okay, if we go this extreme ISO route and totally force this athlete to reorganize things, reduce compensation, this could take a long time and they don't have a long time. Maybe it'd be better if we work it a little bit, but maybe we have to do something that's more specific to get the job done in the deadline they need. Especially if you're a coach, like, okay, so let's say you're working with like a professional athlete, like a hockey player, right? Like someone from the Detroit Red Wings, right? They're paying you 10K and they need you to make as many improvements as possible in 4 weeks, right? What are you going to do? You're just going to hit them with extreme ISOs and not progress anything else? Like especially if you have the time to do it. No, man, I think you're going to bypass it. You're going to do what you can, but you're going to skip that Jay Schroeder progression, to try to do everything you can to make improvements. Right? So this is another thing that a lot of innovators, including Marv, were, and I don't know, Jay, I don't know if he would make exceptions or compromise his programs, but I have seen this before where a lot of pioneers can get very systematic with their approach, and it must be done this way, and this is the protocol, right? And I don't think that's necessarily applicable when you get down into the trenches with your everyday sports performance coach. So I personally would probably bypass the long patient route in order to do the service as best I can, especially if they're paying me, and this is something for you coaches out there that are trying to run your business. You gotta triage these methods, right, to service your client as best as you can. Maybe do this disclaimer like, hey, we're probably not going to get the most ideal results in a short amount of time, but this is the best we're going to try to come up with. Try to get at least some qualities out of this. I don't know. What do you think? What would your approach be in that kind of scenario?
Well, I think no matter what, you're going to be up against the reality of the situation that your athlete is still going to sprint. He's still probably going to have team activities where they lift weights and they have practices and they have things like that. So you might not be able to kind of like rewire them from the ground up. But what I mean is that they don't progress you to like the next tier of their system because it's designed to be layered. But I think you can do a lot of other things. And obviously with the ARP wave, you can do a lot of the basic movements that they do anyway and get more out of it. So I think there's definitely some flexibility in terms of like the real world application. Because like you have to keep in mind with Adam Archuleta, they had like a 5 or 6 year plan, like Jay Schroeder said. I don't want him peaking when he's like just a freshman in college or whatever the case may be. So I think you can still be flexible enough there, just given that the reality of the situation of the athlete and just understanding that things are not going to be perfect. But if you can, definitely do try to build that foundation. And I think if you kind of have the ISO extremes as the centerpiece of the training and build other elements around it, because it's inevitable that you'd have to do that, I think that could be a good compromise there.
Yeah, that's also another thing. We'll probably end with this. The Adam Archuleta Jay Schroeder story. Like, why has this story? Like, how come there's not like Archuletas popping up left and right? Right? How come there's no like these stories are kind of rare. It reminds me of the Troy Polamalu Mark Marinovich story. Where you get like these two coaches, like a coach and an athlete, decide to just stick together for a long time and both equally working on a singular goal. But like you said, a lot of these stories require a huge commitment from the coach and the athlete together. Years of development. This is exactly how the Soviets did it. Like it would just be like, hey, this is your new life. We're going to basically engineer you, and it's going to be like a 5 to 6 year process because the Olympic Games are always 4 years spaced out, right? So it makes a lot of sense. But not everyone I would say that's like probably like the 0.00001% of all strength and conditioning scenarios where you got a coach and an athlete who are willing to basically have some sort of like kind of like a marriage almost, where they're going to be working together day in and day out for this one goal. And I think that's why you don't see a lot of Adam Archuleta, Troy Polamalu, or even Rafael dos Anjos success stories, is because that kind of commitment is really hard for two people. Not just the training, but the psychology of being around a person for that long. Like most businesses can't keep an employee for a year. Most bands, like rock bands, they break up after like two albums because they just get fucking sick of each other, right? And this is the thing. Like I worked with some athletes. Like I worked with this female soccer player. We worked together for 3 years, and I'm not gonna lie, man. After a while, I'd be like, "Geez, man, like I'm just sick of her bullshit, and she's probably sick of my bullshit, right? Because they're human beings, right? You know, it's as much as we're professionals, it's going to turn, normal human behavior can get to anyone. So I don't know. I just think that's something for some of you athletes and some of you coaches to think about. You know, if you want a crazy Adam Archuleta success story, a Troy Polamalu success story, and Rafael dos Anjos, it's gonna be a long game. It's gonna be years of investment. It's gonna be thousands of dollars of your own money out of your pocket that you're gonna be paying. Like, oh fuck. Well, we just lost Ivan. For you viewers that are watching, so we'll probably keep this going. Hopefully, we get Ivan to jump back in so it can give us a conclusion. But technical difficulties, everyone. Okay, let's message Ivan. For some of you viewers, I apologize. Is he back in? I think we're back.
Okay, yeah, I'm back. Yeah, so
We're
I
back.
got cut off like when you were talking about like that. It's like if you want to have that long game, it has to be that like long investment, like a sensei with a student, where the student's like, "But I want to do a quadruple spinning kick and shoot fireballs," and it's like before you shoot fireballs, you stand on one
Yeah.
leg for 7 hours and think about life and think about what
Yeah.
you feel, that kind of thing. So that was kind of the last part that I thought
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I thought
And
about then for myself.
yeah, so I was just kind of explaining like just the time and financial commitment it takes to become an Adam Archuleta or a Troy Polamalu or a Rafael dos Anjos, one of these rare instances. And that's probably the reason we don't see a lot of these success stories kind of pop up. Athletes have to travel, they're in between jobs, they run out of money, they gain a lot of money, they get a job, say at the NFL, but they got to go live in Seattle now, and they got to find a whole new performance coach to work with. So it's probably just like you said, the realities and the conditions of actually running the sports performance protocols in business, are a huge factor to think about. But but yeah, we'll conclude with that. Very interesting stuff, Ivan. Great topic. We got to have you back on and
Yeah,
do like
absolutely.
a
Yeah, and like a lot of clients would just get bored, like doing the same thing, which is what a lot of the
Mhm.
issue that a lot of these coaches run into, which is why you see like watered down versions of some of these programs where they'll give you like, I don't know if you see that with the Marinovich stuff as well, where it's like, okay, they give you like a little bit of this, and with the Jay Schroeder stuff, it's like, okay, well, if you can just do 2 minute lunch because we got to keep these kids engaged, and then we'll add some other stuff from the later phases of the program just so they don't get bored, and we'll just try to do it at enough of a volume to where they can't kill themselves, but to where they still get adaptations, and it becomes kind of a compromise, yeah, but like not the maybe not the true path that the inventors of these systems intended, I guess. But again, the
Yeah.
reality of the situation, like you said.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I actually experienced that firsthand. Well, every coach experiences that, but I do remember I had to work with a coach. The sports performance gym hired me to bring on the nervous system training program because they were getting so many injuries with their athletes. And this guy, man, I'm not gonna name names, but I remember I had to work with him, and he would always, I'm gonna be totally honest, he'd always fuck up the protocol because he would get bored. And it's like, dude, it's not about you. It's about the results of the athletes. Sorry, I'm kind of like venting a little bit about my past, but it is a thing. It is a big variable. Boredom, lack of engagement, people's different opinions, the athlete ego kind of get involved. They don't want to do it. They want to do what they like, or the coach's ego getting involved. Like, hey, this doesn't seem as fun. Let's change things up for them, and not following like a protocol structure. So there's so many variables that come with developing a successful athlete and running a successful sports performance gym, that a lot of people need to think about, especially on the Instagram space. Maybe that can kind of give you a better lens when you view some of these crazy success stories and give you a better idea of how you can develop your own athletes and things to look out for. Stuff that people really don't talk about in the space. Everything's about modalities, but there's not a lot of insight on, the cons or the difficulties that come with the sports performance business. So very interesting thing to touch on. But yeah, but Ivan, let's tell the people, how can they find you? Like, what are your socials? Where can they get a hold of your information? And how can they start training with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I'm iaz.training. I also got a Telegram channel, which is IAZ_training, and on YouTube as enlightened_athlete. So these are kind of my main profiles outside of the Russian social networks, obviously, which I also use a lot. And if they want to train with me, well, then they can just shoot me a DM in any of these places, and we can kind of talk about their goals and see what I can offer them as far as the kind of programming and the kind of goals that they have and whether our philosophies align.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, guys, check out Ivan's breakdowns. Super awesome. Just look for the guy with the sunglasses most of the time. He's always breaking down other people's training. And I always appreciate that because, the more you can educate, the more value you can offer your audience, the better the whole industry gets. If any of you want to check out some of my content, well, of course, like, comment, subscribe, Nervous System Training Podcast on YouTube. You can follow me at Quinton.Torres, Quinton with 2 I's, 36, Quinton.Torres 36, and IG. Check out my videos, get a part of the Nervous System Training Network, because I believe the future of sports performance is neural. Everything's kind of heading in this direction. Social media is really educating the masses on the benefits of this training. So jump on, be open-minded, try these principles out, and yeah, man, experience the results for yourself. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you on another episode of the Nervous System Training Podcast.